Don't say anything since corporate is coming for an inspection. You understand? Don't say anything foolish. In any case, you don't have the courage to. Johnson, the branch manager, was ensuring that his subordinate remained in line until the very end. He may have been concerned that his subordinates could say something needless to the inspectors, despite the harshness of his statements. I mentally answered to Johnson, "You're already in the middle of an inspection." Since Johnson's face would soon grow pale, I must admit that looking at his profile made me giggle. I couldn't suppress my excitement. "Just so you know, today is the last day of your reign. Your life is going to take a nosedive from today on," I said, loud enough for Johnson to hear, or not. "I'm going to enjoy myself a little today. The drama of retaliation has begun. Joseph Jones is my name. I work for a company that manufactures medical gadgets, and this year I turned 44. My business is a significant participant, vying for the nation's largest market share. I've worked for this company for 10 years, by the way. I worked in a totally different field before. There was a small print business in town where I used to work. It was a little company, nothing like the one I work for now. I was raised by a single mom, and due to our financial situation, I began working as soon as I graduated from high school. I was informed that I have no recollection of my father because he passed away when I was quite little. Despite working 3 part-time jobs for me, my mother was unable to pay for my college education. I could have taken out a loan to attend college, but I was hesitant and decided to obtain a job instead because I wanted to ease my mom's burden a little. I assumed I would work at that print business for the rest of my life since I had no more schooling or contacts. But there are always surprises in life. My life drastically changed when I was 34. I received an invitation to join my current firm. I will discuss the specifics later. Being hired by a large corporation was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for a recent high school graduate who was employed at a tiny business. Naturally, I agreed without question. However, the work was completely different from my expectations. In the 10 years since I joined, I can honestly state that I have seldom had a minute of relaxation. Nevertheless, since I was hired by such a large organization as a high school graduate, I felt I shouldn't be complaining about my job and gave it my best effort. I can only speculate as to how much work the other employees were doing, but I can state with confidence that, out of the more than 5,000 people working for this organization, I did the most work. Maybe the employer has noticed my efforts over the last 10 years because I was just informed about a transfer the other day. I was moved to the Houston branch when I was 44. Many of the moved employees are so at ease in the Houston branch's relaxed corporate culture that they have no desire to shift to other branches. Its distinct culture is most likely a result of its distance from the New York headquarters. There are no issues with shopping or anything else because the city is respectable and the food is excellent. For someone like me, who puts in more effort than everyone else, I assumed this was a prize transfer, a way of saying, "Enjoy Texas." However, I soon realized my mistake. Steve Johnston was the branch manager in Houston on my first day. He has only worked at the Houston branch for 2 years and is 2 years older than me at 46. He was formerly a section manager in Headquarters General Affairs Division. To put it briefly, Johnson is a genuinely disagreeable man who seems to take pleasure in putting others down. He gets very upset and chastises people for more than an hour when they make a mistake. How can you work here without feeling ashamed after making such a minor error? Is your salary being stolen by a thief? How about you give up by tomorrow? That was how he would continue to nag. Everybody makes mistakes from time to time. Johnson seems to have nothing better to do than point out even the smallest errors and shame others for them, regardless of his opinion. I was shocked to hear from someone at headquarters that they never wanted to leave the Houston branch because it was such a comfortable place to work. I was eager to return to headquarters by the first day. Apparently, though, this was the situation before to Johnson's arrival. The environment at the Houston branch has apparently deteriorated since he arrived. I couldn't believe someone like him had been promoted to branch manager, but apparently, Johnson is the nephew of an executive. Everyone said he got in through connections and was promoted solely because of nepotism. Seeing him in person, it all made sense. It was pure nepotism. However, because of his difficult personality, he was transferred to a branch far from headquarters. The top brass at headquarters probably wanted to keep Johnson out of sight because he was so hard to deal with. From the perspective of the Houston branch staff, it was a huge inconvenience, but it showed how much trouble he was for the higher-ups. As someone who loves to look down on others, Johnson found me, a high school graduate, to be an easy target. From my first day, he asserted his dominance and insulted me relentlessly. "So you're Joseph, the guy starting today." I looked at your background. Just a high school grad and a mid-career hire too. I'm shocked our company would hire someone so obviously dumb. Sure, I was a high school grad and a mid-career hire, but this was the first time anyone had ever made an issue out of it. In my experience, people are typically judged by their current performance, not their past. Digging up the past serves no purpose and has no benefits. You're right, branch manager, but is there a problem with that? I quickly shot back. I regretted it, but I had just spoken my mind, and it was more of a question than a rebuttal. So, I thought it would be okay. However, branch manager Johnson seemed very offended that a subordinate would argue with him, and he got angry. You seem to be mistaken. But in a company, the boss's word is absolute, especially for someone like you with just a high school diploma. All you need to do is say yes to everything I say. What nonsense. Does Johnson even know what era we're living in? However, he seemed to genuinely believe what he was saying, and when I tried to argue, he intimidated me with a glare. I thought that if I said anything more, I'd get scolded 10 times worse, so I stayed silent. It seems you finally understand. High school grads are really slow to get it. By the way, what's with your hairstyle? Get it cut short by tomorrow. Johnson seemed satisfied after venting and returned to his seat. But what was with the comment about my hairstyle? My hair isn't that long, and this was the first time in my life anyone had pointed it out. Just to be sure, I asked my colleague at the next desk what they thought of my hair. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. He probably just wanted to complain. He always adds an extra complaint at the end. He probably forgot he even said it, so just ignore it. It seems Johnston likes to nitpick other employees too. I initially planned to get a haircut after work to avoid further comments, but my colleague's words made me forget about it. Even though I didn't change my hairstyle at all, Johnson never mentioned it again. Clearly, he was just nitpicking whatever caught his eye. What a petty person. Since then, Johnson has kept picking on me with trivial complaints every time we talk. What's with that pale face? You look like a sick person. It lowers the morale of the team. Why don't you quit and stop being a burden to your colleagues? No one else thought I looked sick, so this was just another one of Johnson's baseless accusations. This happened almost every day. If I tried to avoid him, he'd come over and spew insults anyway. He only returned to his seat once he felt satisfied. But I really wished he wouldn't bother me every day. I wondered if he had nothing better to do. Since I came to the Houston branch, I haven't been able to do any meaningful work because of Johnson's orders. Originally, I was supposed to work on reducing unnecessary expenses for the Houston branch, but that was completely out of the question. A high school graduate handling cost reduction? I can't allow such a pointless task. You'd just do a sloppy job anyway. Stick to menial tasks. He'd assigned me to trivial duties like collecting trash, making copies, and serving tea. I was even made to run personal errands for Johnson. Go get me coffee from the corner shop. Oh, and we're out of toilet paper at home, so maybe the supermarket is better. Not that it matters if you're not here, but I'll probably have more menial tasks for you, so hurry back. At this point, I was essentially Johnson's servant. My manager and colleagues thought it was a problem and spoke up to Johnson, but he wouldn't listen. When they persisted, Johnson got angry and verbally abused them too, defending a high school grad with no education. I'll see you at his level. If you want to join him in menial tasks, be my guest. This was pure intimidation, but Johnson believed he could do whatever he wanted at the Houston branch without consequences. The manager got angry at his tyranny, but I couldn't let this cause more trouble for everyone, so I calmed them down. The toxic atmosphere at the Houston branch was entirely Johnson's fault. The other employees were not only supportive, but also angry on my behalf. I was moved to the point of tears by their warmth. I appreciate your support, but if you defend me further, it might cause problems for you too. I'll handle this on my own, so please just watch over me. I have some ideas on how to deal with him. Are you sure? What kind of ideas? I can't say now, but I won't let him do as he pleases. I'll make him regret underestimating me. When I said this with confidence, the manager was convinced. Seeing your face, it looks like you're fine, but don't push yourself too hard. If you need help, don't hesitate to ask. The manager was considerate even to me, a new employee at the Houston branch. I felt I shouldn't worry someone like that, so I firmly resolved to handle things on my own. Of course, I was confident I could manage it. However, I needed to do some research, and timing was crucial, so I decided to stay quiet and wait for the right moment. Several months passed since I was assigned to the Houston branch. I was still doing menial tasks. Branch manager Johnson always interfered whenever I tried to do other work. Doing these trivial tasks made me wonder if I really was incompetent. This was likely Johnson's method. He would push those he disliked to the edge, forcing them to quit on their own. However, I would never quit voluntarily. That would be exactly what Johnson wanted. Besides, I couldn't leave until I made him regret underestimating me. While I was thinking this, branch manager Johnson called me in. Since I had no urgent tasks, I went right away. Johnson started saying something outrageous. In 2 weeks, HQ is coming for an inspection. You came here to cut costs, right? If you tell the inspectors that the Houston branch's accounts are fine, it'll be convincing. So, put together some adjusted accounting data and compile it into a report. Are you saying we should show falsified data to the inspectors? What if we get caught? Besides, I've only been doing menial tasks and have never even seen the real data. I can't make a report. Technically, I was sent by HQ to review the Houston branch's accounting data as part of my job. However, Johnson had always refused to show me any of this data. Shut up. If the lie gets exposed, we'll just say you did it on your own. I'll let you see the data. Johnson then called the accounting staff and instructed them to show me the data. Just show him the bare minimum needed to create the report. As long as he has the monthly balance sheet, he can make something up. Don't show this low-level high school grad any detailed data. He wouldn't understand it anyway. This was complete nonsense. I couldn't understand why I would be blamed if the fraud was discovered. Creating a report with minimal data was outright fabrication, not just falsification. I was speechless at Johnson's outrageous command. Seeing my reaction, Johnson seemed to think I had no objections and smiled with satisfaction. All right. I have a meeting, so you can get this done in a week, right? It's just made-up data anyway. Even if it's fabricated data, making a report that won't raise any suspicion from the inspectors requires thorough scrutiny. There's no way I can create a foolproof report in just a week, I thought. However, I decided to agree. Understood. I'll have it ready in a week. That's a good response for a high school grad. Well, get to it. As I watched Johnson leave the room, I muttered to myself, finally, the time has come to make you eat your words. In 2 weeks, you'll be in hell. My voice was a bit louder than intended, and Johnson turned around, but he didn't seem to catch what I said. Did you say something? Probably something stupid. If you're talking to yourself, it's a sign you're losing it. Go see a doctor. It's quite something that he can throw out insults without even hearing what I said. There's no need to pity someone like him. I felt no guilt about dragging him to hell. I immediately began working on the report. However, I didn't just create the fake report Johnson wanted. I decided to make 2 sets of reports. One set contained the fabricated numbers that Johnson requested, and the other set had the accurate data. I already knew what I was going to do with these reports. To do this properly, I needed to verify the correct data. I asked the accounting staff if they could show me the accurate expense data for the Huan branch. But if the branch manager finds out, who knows what he'll do to me? I can't. Are you going to keep obeying him forever? If we get caught, I'll take all the blame. Besides, it actually won't be a problem even if he finds out. I whispered to the accounting staff about what I was planning to do. Really? But if you do that, Johnson will hate you, and who knows what he'll do. When I whispered again, the accounting staff was shocked but promised to help me. Immediately, I could create an accurate report. Johnson's trip to hell was certain. 2 weeks passed. Today was the day HQ was coming for the inspection. Of course, I had already submitted the fabricated report to Johnson. Johnson planned to hand the falsified report to the inspectors without batting an eye. Everyone, HQ is coming for an inspection, so keep your mouths shut. Don't say anything stupid, got it? Not that you have the guts to anyway. Even at the last moment, Johnson was warning his subordinates to stay quiet. We're already in the middle of an inspection. I silently retorted to Johnson in my mind. Honestly, seeing Johnson's profile made me want to laugh, thinking about how his face would soon turn pale. I couldn't help but feel excited. Just so you know, your reign ends today. From today on, your life will plummet. I muttered this just loud enough that Johnson might hear, or might not. Today, I'm going to have a bit of fun myself. The revenge drama begins now. Nice to meet you. I'm Richard, the leader of the inspection team. Let's get started. First, we'd like to check the Houston branch's accounting for the past year. Do you have the reports? As Richard said this, Johnson handed over the report. We'll read through the report, so please lend us a conference room. Make sure no one enters while we're checking. With that, the inspection team entered the conference room. Johnson felt relieved after handing over the fabricated report. I decided to act. At that moment, I headed toward the conference room. Of course, Johnson, worried about the inspection, was glancing at the conference room and quickly noticed my move. Immediately coming over, he asked, "Hey, what are you doing? You're going to disturb the inspectors. Didn't they say no one should enter?" "Yeah, they did, but I forgot to give them an important document. I'll just hand it over. Don't worry, I won't say anything stupid." I smirked at Johnson, which made him furious. He didn't like seeing the usual target of his ridicule looking confident. This reaction was part of my plan, and his outburst only made me grin wider. Seeing this, Johnson got even angrier. "You're a load-educated fool. Stay away from the inspectors. Go sit somewhere far away, or better yet, go home. Just keep your mouth shut. I promised I won't say anything, but if they're missing a document, it would be troublesome for them. I'll just give it to them." Johnson hated the idea of me, the person who made the fake report, getting close to the inspectors. He was worried I might reveal the truth. In that case, I'll give it to them. You stay away. If you say something stupid, it'll cause problems. As we argued, it seemed our voices were heard inside the conference room, and Richard came out. Naturally, since we were raising our voices right in front of the door. "What's going on? If you need to talk, could you do it somewhere else?" Richard glared at us as he said this. I'm sorry, but he was trying to do something strange, so I was warning him. As the branch manager, we'll move right away. Please continue reviewing the materials. Johnson tried to appease Richard with polite words. However, I took the opportunity to silently hand over the additional documents to Richard. Having heard our conversation, Richard thanked me and accepted the documents. Thank you. So you forgot to hand these over earlier. We'll add these to our review. Richard began flipping through the additional documents I handed over, but then suddenly stopped. I see, he understood. With that, Richard returned to the conference room. You didn't give them any strange documents, did you? If you did something stupid, it'll be a big problem. I didn't give them anything strange. I kept quiet, just as you wanted. With those additional documents, I think they'll finish the review quickly. 10 minutes after I said that, the conference room door opened, and Richard and the others came out. Richard addressed Branch Manager Johnson. We finished reviewing the documents. After contacting the CEO, he wants to discuss these materials with you, so we'd like you to come to HQ with us today. Can you come with us when we leave today? That's quite sudden. Can't it be tomorrow? Being called to HQ immediately after reading the documents was unprecedented, so Johnson was understandably shocked. No, since we're here, let's go together. We don't have any questions about the documents, but the CEO wants more details. Thank you. The words were polite, but the tone left no room for refusal. Realizing this was serious, Johnson approached me with a furious look. You must have included something strange in those additional documents. There's no way they finished the review so quickly. You definitely. As Johnson started complaining to me, Richard interrupted. We're leaving right away, so let's go. Johnson couldn't keep complaining in front of the inspection team, so he reluctantly started preparing to leave. However, he suddenly had an idea and made a proposal to Richard. The person who created these documents is my subordinate Joseph, who handed you the additional papers. It would be smoother if he came along to explain. Hey, you're not busy, right? Don't say you can't come. The unnecessary comment about being not busy was typical, but I had already planned to go along, so it wasn't a problem. That's fine. Since I made the documents, I'll take responsibility if there's anything wrong. Hearing my words, Branch Manager Johnson beamed. Even if I hadn't said anything, he probably intended to shift all the blame onto me. But hearing me volunteer to take responsibility made him delighted. You've got it. If there's a mistake, it's all on you. Don't forget what you just said. And so, we headed to HQ. For those unfamiliar with this, the distance from Houston to New York might seem quite far. Indeed, it takes about 5 hours by bullet train, but less than 2 hours by plane. Considering transfers, it takes less than 3 hours to get to HQ in New York. We left Houston around noon and were in the HQ conference room by 4:00 p.m. The CEO was seated in front. Branch Manager Johnson sat across from the CEO and called to me. Hey, sit down quickly. We can't start if you're not ready. All right, I'll sit down then. I walked past Johnson and took a seat next to the CEO. What are you doing? This isn't a joke. Know your place. How dare you speak like that to the future CEO? Are you mocking his son? Branch Manager Johnson was stunned by the CEO's shocking words. What? What does that mean? It means exactly what it sounds like. Joseph Jones is my son. It hasn't been officially announced, but I plan to have him succeed me as the next CEO. Yes, I am the CEO's son. I was raised by a single mother. But the truth is, my mother was asked to disappear from my father's life by my paternal grandfather when he learned of her pregnancy before marriage. My father's family was well known, and they wanted him to marry someone from a distinguished family they had long been associated with. So my grandfather offered money to my mother to leave my father. My grandfather even went as far as to beg on his knees. So my mother moved away without contacting my father and refused to accept any money. This decision led to our life of poverty, but when I learned the truth, I felt proud of my mother. Had she taken the money and left, I might have hated her. My father, on the other hand, didn't know about my grandfather's actions and thought my mother had left him without a word. It wasn't until my grandfather was on his deathbed that he tearfully confessed the truth to my father. I'm sorry. I realize now I made a terrible mistake. After my mother left, my father remained unmarried, living a life of solitude. My grandfather had assumed my father would eventually marry someone else, but that never happened, leading to his deep regret. After my grandfather passed away, my father hired a detective and found me. That's how I, a high school graduate, got into this company. Of course, since my parents were never married, my father and I have different last names, and legally he isn't recognized as my father yet. But my father, feeling deeply apologetic, wanted to formally acknowledge me and establish a proper parent-child relationship. He also proposed that I take over his company. However, I thought that suddenly succeeding such a position without any experience would cause backlash. So I suggested that I work harder than anyone else until he retired and then be evaluated based on my performance. Though initially hesitant, my father agreed to my proposal. Subsequently, I was sent to various branches to learn everything about the company. I was to observe everything from a regular employee's perspective and report any improvements needed to the CEO. While it was my idea to be evaluated based on my work, my father saw how useful I was and worked me hard for 10 years. The mission at the Houston branch wasn't just about cost cutting. There were suspicions about financial discrepancies and the branch manager's potential misconduct. Unaware of this, Johnson had me create fake reports, which played right into my hands. When I explained all this to Johnson, he was speechless, but then tried to shift the blame onto me. You said you'd take responsibility if there were mistakes. You made the report, so you should take the blame. You remembered that, but unfortunately for you, I included the truth in the supplementary documents I was sent by the CEO to uncover your misconduct. The initial report was fake, and I said I would provide accurate documents later. Furthermore, when Johnson wasn't looking, I handed the correct documents to Richard on the plane, so I didn't report anything incorrect to the inspection team. Looking at the correct documents, the Houston branch's entertainment expenses are disproportionately high compared to other branches. My son has investigated all the expenses. You know what you spent it on, right? The CEO glared at Johnson, who immediately fell to his knees. I'm so sorry, but I only used a little. Please have mercy. A little? Once we calculate the amount, it will be huge. Using company money for personal use, even a little, is unacceptable. Using company funds without permission is embezzlement, a serious crime. If you can't repay the money, you could face a prison sentence. However, embezzlement charges typically require the company to file a complaint, so Johnson is hoping for leniency from the CEO. I'll repay all the money, just please don't file a complaint. If you do, I'll lose my job, and my family will abandon me. Seeing Johnson crying and begging was pitiful. Even now, he's worried about finding another job. Repaying such a large amount would surely reveal everything to his family, and even if it doesn't become a criminal case, they'd likely abandon him. Ultimately, he's only concerned about himself. Repaying the money is a given. You repay every cent. We will file a complaint. We must treat this as a criminal case to set an example for other employees. Branch manager Johnson listened to those words with a look of shock. Later, when we calculated the amount of money he had embezzled, it became clear that he could never repay it in his lifetime. Naturally, he couldn't repay the money, so he sold his house and exhausted all his savings. Yet, he still had enormous debts. Since he showed remorse and willingly surrendered all his assets, the court granted him a suspended sentence for the criminal charges. Although he avoided prison, his family abandoned him. His wife filed for divorce, and his 2 children disowned him. Even his parents disowned him, and all his relatives and friends turned away. He was left completely alone. He was, of course, terminated from the company and now has to find a new job. However, the rumor of his embezzlement spread quickly, making it nearly impossible for him to find employment. I've heard he's doing day labor at his age involving physical labor and night shifts, which is taking a toll on his health. I've even heard stories from people who didn't recognize him due to how much he had deteriorated. It's entirely his own fault, so I don't feel any sympathy. However, I take it as a lesson to stay humble and not let being the future CEO go to my head. The Houston branch regained its former vitality after a new manager replaced Johnson. Now, the Houston branch has become a place everyone envies for transfers, so things should be stable for a while. I was called back to HQ after the chaos at the Houston branch was resolved. Having spent a long time working like a spy for the CEO, traveling between branches, I was highly evaluated by the CEO. He suggested we formalize our father-son relationship, feeling that I had genuinely contributed to the company with the Houston branch situation. I accepted the proposal. Thus, the CEO and I officially became father and son. At the same time, the CEO promoted me to the position of director. He also introduced me as his son to everyone, making it known that I am the next CEO. It seems I am truly going to become the CEO of this company. It's like a dream, and I still can't quite believe it. But for now, I want to give my all as director until the CEO retires. If I can contribute to the company's profit, the transition to CEO will naturally be accepted. I intend to make the most of each day until then. My name is Jacob. I am a 38-year-old man like everyone else. My health started to suffer since I had been sick of the monotonous work grind since I was younger. I chose to retire early, before I was 40. I went back to my lovely seaside village, which I had left when I was 18, after 20 years away. I work 3 days a week as a fisherman and love fishing full-time now. John, my grandfather, introduced me to this line of work. My father was born the year after he married young. Even at my age, my father married young, so my grandfather, who is just 78 years old, is still a small-scale fisherman. He's thrilled to have me back because we used to spend a lot of time together when I was younger. He often takes me out on his little fishing boat now that I'm at home, and before I know it, he asks, "Why don't you take over for me?" He began to introduce me to the fishing industry. Since I had no intention of returning to my previous career, I reasoned that living a lifetime surrounded by nature wouldn't be all that horrible. I agreed right away, and we went fishing. However, it turned out that the years I spent watching my grandfather work and the real work I did were very different. To start with, everything has such an odd fragrance. Furthermore, everything demands a significant amount of physical strength, including cleaning the fish and pulling in the nets. It was difficult, even if at first I was only helping my grandfather, and I secretly complained, "I don't want to do this anymore." However, my grandfather would smile and ask, "Hey, what's with that pathetic look on your face?" When he saw my expression, "You'll never be my right-hand man at this pace. Come on, pull correctly and bend your knees." He always used this as a means of motivation because he knew how competitive I was. When I began taking sports seriously in school, it was the same. "Oh, so you're going to quit just because some old guy yelled at you?" My grandfather would say to me when I was about to give up, even though the coach and practices were quite harsh. "What is there to be proud of, really, when you're not very good at talking or studying? If you give up now, do you really think you'll accomplish anything? Make an effort and complete at least one challenging task." Now that I think about it, it was fairly harsh, basically telling his own grandchild that he was unworthy. My grandfather was correct, though. I think I would have carried a sense of inferiority and felt burdened by the regret of not giving my all in sports or academics if I had given up on the things I wanted to. The lesson I learned from having someone properly chastise me, assessing my shortcomings, and putting forth a lot of effort to close those gaps relates to both job and education. Furthermore, continuing with athletics allowed me to interact with a wide range of individuals of all ages and backgrounds. I believe that's what taught me how to talk to people who were completely different from me. My grandfather, who has always thought of me as awkward and slow, must have known that I would find it difficult to adjust to working life. He was adamant about keeping me in the sports club because of this. His intention was to fortify me. After facing the difficulties of adulthood, I can now truly comprehend his intentions. I was able to focus on my schoolwork later because of the sense of achievement I had from continuing with athletics. I landed a notoriously hard job, but my sports-related perseverance, physical strength, and people skills more than made up for my innate awkwardness. I was working nonstop in the city for a time, but after days of improper sleep, my body and mind began to deteriorate. I had aged prematurely and appeared considerably older than I actually was before I realized it. Despite being in my 20s, I appeared to be in my late 30s. I was fulfilled at the moment, respected by my coworkers, and liked by everyone around me. However, I would say no if you asked me if I would like to travel back in time. I think it's pointless when young people boast about how little sleep they get or how many hours they work, as I hear them do these days. In fact, when I pushed myself too much, my health checkups turned out badly. I resolved to stop caring about professional advancement and save as much money as I could since I was afraid I would become really sick. I turned in my notice of resignation. My managers made several attempts to stop me, but I refused to exchange my health and life for a job. I made a clear decision. I'm working with my grandfather right now to stay busy. Some would argue that even though it's a little more difficult than moderate employment, I'm still young enough to handle it. However, my body at that point would have been that of a person in their late 60s. I reasoned that it would be wiser to step down early and prolong my healthy years rather than wearing myself out while I still had some vitality. I had even heard tales of office workers who disregarded their health, which resulted in the development of cirrhosis and a death sentence in their 50s. My determination was strengthened even more by those tales. I'm okay with that, even if I won't get credit for saving more money or feeling like I've grown personally. Realizing that my greatest wealth is my health, which is also my most important possession. I was inspired to dive into the sea and catch a variety of seafood by witnessing my grandfather do it. I made the decision to become a full-time fisherman for this reason as well. I had to formally become a fisherman by joining the fishing cooperative in order to obtain seafood of that caliber. I consequently acquired the credentials I needed to dive into the adjacent sea and collect seafood, including abalone. There is a flourishing farming community on this island, with lots of fields and rice paddies. We had wonderful fresh food every day and frequently traded different vegetables from the fields for seafood. My existence on the island became rather satisfying in this way. One day, while I was routinely strolling around the port with my fishing gear, I noticed something peculiar floating in the water. A large, pinkish-purple object. What is that? I pondered. It appeared strangely spherical and three-dimensional, unlike ordinary rubbish or clothing. I was staring at it when all of a sudden there was a splash and it began thrashing around. I was shocked to see that the pink object was a little girl, most likely in elementary school. This is not good. If I don't help, she will stink. I started running over the sandy shore after seeing her in such agony. I ran through the dunes and dove into the ocean. I waded through the waves and swam hard in the direction of the girl. I then understood why, when I was younger, my grandfather had hammered swimming into me so hard. Due to the lack of activities in the area, even young children often play by the lake. This kind of accidental seawater drowning occurs frequently, even in cases where parents take precautions. My grandfather trained me how to swim for extended periods of time in deep water, probably so that I would be able to leap in and save someone if necessary. I was really glad I had followed my grandfather's advice as I held the struggling girl and floated at the surface. But the girl was still flailing around, terrified. Hey, you will sink if you continue to struggle. You must become calm. Give up the struggle. She felt like she might escape my clutches at any time, but she was too distraught to hear me. A deep, booming horn suddenly sounded in the distance. Jacob, hello. Hold on to this." My grandfather saw what was happening and quickly sped in our direction in his boat. He threw us a life ring and shouted, "Ah, Grandpa, you're a lifesaver." I turned to the girl and yelled, "Look, help's here now," as I grabbed onto the life ring with all my effort. "You no longer need to battle because you will be all right." When the girl finally realized she was safe, she stopped thrashing. At last, I can unwind a little, I thought to myself. I grabbed the life ring and swam toward the boat, which was being towed along. I held the girl as she remained silent and fixed her gaze on a single point, obviously tired from her struggle. I hauled the girl out of the water as we approached the boat, and my grandfather hauled her up with his powerful arms. He exclaimed, "Hey, are you all right?" But the girl remained silent, taken aback by his stern tone. Grandpa remarked, "She might have drank a lot of water," after seeing her silence. "We ought to have her examined just in case. Let's visit the physician." He pulled me up, cranked the engine, and we were back on the beach in no time. I hastened to my belongings and dialed the biggest clinic on the island. After describing the circumstances, a young female doctor who had responded stated, "Let's have a look at her, just to be safe." To prevent the girl from becoming chilly, my grandfather hurriedly asked the locals whether anyone had any children's clothing. My hometown is on a little island. Everyone in this place knows one another as a result, and they constantly support one another. My grandfather was well known to all, and they were all eager to help. But with everyone getting older, it was difficult to locate someone who could fit a young girl in their clothes. Many of the younger families had left the island, and the local school had long since closed. Old children's garments have long since been discarded by the majority of the older people. But after a while, my grandfather finally located someone who might have some. He was given some clothing and a towel that belonged to their son by a couple in their 50s, who were regarded as young on this island. My granddad quickly made his way back to my car's parking spot. He ran back with the boy's clothes, which fit the girl because they were close enough in size. We gave them to her and urged her into the vehicle. We gave her a towel and made sure to cover the windows so she could have some privacy. "Dry yourself off here, and take off those damp things. We're going to the doctor after that," I added. The girl had a scared expression. "It's okay," I told her, grinning. "There won't be anything spooky. Fortunately, it doesn't appear that you're injured. All we have to do is make sure you're okay." She closed the car door quietly, still appearing frightened. She started to dry herself off and change after a little while, and I heard her say, "Thank you," softly. "Whose child are you?" My grandfather questioned her once she had done dressing. She surprised us, though, by claiming she wasn't from the island. "It makes sense why I didn't recognize you." "How will we locate your parents, then?" Grandpa remarked, becoming anxious. The youngster claimed she was here for the first time on a trip with her mother, but she couldn't recall her parents' phone numbers. She couldn't even pinpoint where they had split up. For a few while, we both stood there, reflecting. Her mother has to be searching for her as well. We reasoned that by now she must have contacted the locals and traveled to the police station. We planned to give each other a call later. Maybe the police station had already gotten in touch with us, or maybe we would hear back from the clinic. Keeping that in mind, we went to the clinic to have the girl examined. There once had been an elderly physician who managed the island's sole clinic. He was a skilled yet kind practitioner. But as he grew older, he experienced cardiac issues. He ultimately went back to work after a few sessions, but he gradually cut back on his clinic hours until he was unable to continue. At that point, a young female physician expressed her desire to take over the clinic. It was first questioned if we would be comfortable with such a young-looking, inexperienced doctor, but it turned out that she was about my age. Since none of his children had chosen to become doctors, he chose to commit the clinic to her because of her ability and vast experience. Her arrival was welcomed by the people, who had been concerned about the island's healthcare system's future. Despite its age, The facility exudes coziness because to its soothing wooden construction. Perhaps that's why the girl seemed to loosen up a little as we got closer to the building. The young doctor greeted us warmly and gently as soon as we opened the glass doors. "You must be Jacob, I see. Please enter," she pleaded. After hearing that, I entered the clinic. It had been tastefully refurbished inside. It astonished me. Its big windows and calm wood interior were memories of the place's previous gloomy floors stained black. The old bookshelves had been replaced as well, and were now stocked with senior citizen magazines. Gazing around, I was astounded by how much had changed, and I saw that the girl, who was still a little afraid, was following my grandfather cautiously into the examination room. "Never fear. There won't be anything spooky. You were saved quickly, so I'm sure you're okay." Grandpa patted her back tenderly. As the girl and the doctor entered the examination room, the tension in her face gradually eased. The examination's findings demonstrated that the girl's body was in excellent condition. We were relieved to hear the official outcome, even though we had assured her that everything would be all right. My grandfather called the police station during the exam, and sure enough, her mother had arrived and inquired about her. She had left for the clinic. The girl suddenly brightened when she heard this, giving me her first smile and asking, "Really? I'm grateful." Shortly later, we observed a woman sprinting wildly from outside the clinic toward it. "Wham! I really apologize. It appears that my daughter upset you." The woman was in her 30s and was panting from running. She was elegant and lovely. She reprimanded her kid before introducing herself as Lily. "Hey, did you tell these people your name and thank them properly?" she asked, turning to face the girl. The girl abruptly became aware and apologized, appearing to have just realized. "Emily is my name. I sincerely appreciate your saving me." In response, my grandfather said, No. Everything else doesn't matter as long as she's secure. And didn't you already thank us earlier? That kind of encounter makes you naturally forgetful. Take it easy on her." Lily repeatedly lowered her head and apologized once more. "You're Jacob, the one who saved my daughter, right?" she asked, turning to face me at that point. "Yes, that's right," I answered, assuming the police had told her. "I can't thank you enough for saving my daughter's life," she said. "I'm not even sure how to show my appreciation. Actually, there isn't a necessity. I simply followed everyone else's lead. No, I can't just end it there. I'm not sure what would have happened if you hadn't been there, but you saved her life. I sincerely appreciate it." She bowed repeatedly, tears welling up in her eyes. It's true that the girl might not have lived if she had persisted in her struggle. Actually, it happens frequently here that someone falls into the water and never comes back. Lily was probably blaming herself for not seeing her kid when they were close to the water. My grandfather added, "At her age, kids are full of energy," as I was at a loss for words. "It takes place. But next time, please use more caution." Lily nodded while wiping her tears. "Why did you go off to such a dangerous place by yourself?" she reprimanded Emily. Emily responded, "Well, the men looked like they were having so much fun swimming." Ah. I thought to myself, she must have seen us diving for abalone the day before. She must have reasoned that she could enjoy herself just as much as us if she dove into the sea. She had courage, though, for a child to jump into the water fully clothed, I had to say. We are certified divers with specialized training. The equipment you were wearing is completely different from what we wear. You realize now how dangerous it might be after entering the water while still wearing clothes, don't you? Emily gave a faint nod. I then made her swear that she would never do that again. I claimed it was unnecessary, but Lily gave me an envelope, took Emily's hand, bowed, and walked away. She's quite the adventurous youngster, I thought to myself as I watched them go. She should return and receive the necessary training if she decides to attempt diving once more when she is older. My grandfather laughed as he looked at me after they had left. Aha. With the swimming I taught you, you saved a girl, but you couldn't even get back on the boat by yourself due to your advanced age and inactivity. Child, you still have a long way to go. Hey, let me have a moment. I gave it my all in my response, giving him a little glare. During our chat, I noticed that someone was watching at us. I turned to face the young doctor who had just finished tying up after the exam and inquired, "Is something wrong?" She was staring at us really closely for some reason. She said, I didn't realize earlier because things were hectic, but your name is John, right?" My granddad was questioned by her. Yes, that's right." "Well, it's somewhat of a coincidence, but I was shocked to learn that you were John. My name is Mia. Do you still recall me?" My grandfather hesitated, thinking, then his eyes widened as she stared right at him. Ah, Mia, from back then. After that, he started telling Mia things from his past. Mia had relocated to the island with her parents when my granddad was considerably younger. Back then, Mia had been a sickly child and frequently missed school, preventing her from attending courses with other students. Even when others made an effort to be kind, she found it more difficult to attend class the more she missed it, and the more alienated she felt from her peers. It was hard to get over that difference. Mia ultimately made the decision to concentrate on getting well and relaxing through middle school in order to enroll in a traditional high school. Even though her parents, who are both doctors, made sure she continued her education, she found it difficult to learn from her family members. Mia cried a lot of days since she was lonely and didn't have any friends at school. While strolling one day, she happened to see my grandfather happily swimming in the sea. Watching my grandfather swim with such abandon made Mia think, it must be so much fun to swim like that. My granddad waved her over after catching her eye. He swam over and started teaching Mia how to catch fish in the shallows when she ran to the edge of the water. She began seeing my grandfather on a daily basis after that, fitting shore excursions in between her coursework. Her parents let her play by the sea since they could tell it was strengthening her. Mia smiled again slowly as she spent more time in the natural world with my grandfather. Through her seashore activities, she also made acquaintances with neighborhood kids, making companions her own age. Mia's face at that point was entirely different from her arrival on the island. The pale, weak kid who had walked nervously while clutching her parents' hands had become a happy, active child basking in the sun. Mia was greeted without any obstacles by the friendly and hospitable island children, even though she wasn't from the island. Mia was able to make friends with them just as readily as she would have with her peers as a result. She told us that the negative emotions she was carrying around from the embarrassment with her peers began to go away because of my grandfather. She felt confident enough to go back to school because she had friends her own age. Her health steadily improved as she played with the island kids more and more. She no longer got sick from running around with them or fell from tiredness. After a while, her parents declared she was well enough to go, and a few days before she graduated from primary school, they made the announcement. After around 2 years, Mia's fun time on the island came to an end, and she returned to her hometown to start middle school. She begged her parents to let her attend middle school on the island since she loved it so much. Her parents, however, forbade it because they knew the island's middle school was failing, and they wanted their daughter to become a doctor. With tears in her eyes, Mia vowed to return to the island eventually. Mia went on to say that my grandfather had given her something more for which she was thankful. She had experienced hopelessness as a young girl, thinking she was forced to follow her parents' instructions. She didn't dislike the notion of being a doctor. Rather, she felt pressured to pursue it because her parents were in the medical field, as though she had no other choice. Even though I had my own will, I couldn't bring myself to say anything because they were my parents, and I didn't want to offend them. It was unimaginable for me to argue with them, because I was always respectful and serious, she remarked. My grandfather said to Mia, who had shown dissatisfaction with her desire to become a doctor, "Look, No parent is going to abandon their child just because they get upset during that period. Granted, some parents are bad, but yours don't seem to be one of those. Did they come to this island specifically for you? For it, they even took time off from work. Few parents would go to that extent. Thus, perhaps if you are sincere with them, things will gradually improve. They may not change their wishes, but if you demonstrate your independence, they will see that you are capable of leading a fulfilling life without becoming a doctor. They will comprehend if they truly love you. Inspired by his remarks, Mia informed her parents that she would choose to attend public middle school rather taking the admission tests for private schools. She later made the decision to become a doctor after discovering, via internet research, that there weren't many medical facilities available on the island. My grandfather appeared shocked, not realizing that this was the reason Mia had come back to the island as a physician. Hearing about my grandfather's prior involvement in her life astonished me as well. My grandfather smiled gently and said, "I see you, Mia. You really did care about this island. It's true that not much remains on this island, and none of us anticipated the arrival of a young physician. It was a major problem when the previous doctor passed away, and everyone was concerned about what the government would do. I assumed they would just send a doctor who didn't want to be here, at random, from a university hospital. But you're not like that, Mia. In addition to being an accomplished physician, you are always so sweet and smiling with the islanders. You are nothing less than a savior to us. For the good of this island, I thank you for pursuing medical school, but I apologize if we have placed too much pressure on you." Mia shook her head and declared that she knew she had to return to this island, whether or not she became a doctor. Being a doctor was really the only thing she could do here, and she was fine with that because the only jobs available are farming, fishing, and medicine. "I'm sorry I cried so much back then, and thank you for always helping me, like that time when I slipped into deep water, or when I tripped over that huge sea cucumber," she continued, her shy but endearing grin on her lips. "Thank you so much for that." Mia appeared sincere in her happiness at seeing my grandfather. My grandfather then grinned and remarked, "Oh, and Jacob used to be a doctor too. Jacob, what are your thoughts? Mia is going to have a hard time managing things by herself. What if you occasionally helped her out in the clinic when you took a vacation from fishing?" At the time, Mia was 35 and I was 38, and we were both unmarried. He was making a point, and I understood it when Mia flushed and replied, "It's true that handling emergencies by myself can be difficult, so I'd appreciate any help you can offer." Despite having retired, I ended up continuing my medical practice because I was unable to refuse. Nevertheless, I was happy that my abilities hadn't declined too much. If I had waited a few years after retiring, things could have turned out differently. It might be too late to help in some circumstances if I couldn't do surgery correctly. It seemed to me that a physician who was unable to provide care for patients who were unable to go to the mainland's larger hospital would be of little use. But things weren't as busy here as they were at my last job, so I thought I could handle it. In addition, I was motivated to assist others in need, which is why I accepted my grandfather's recommendation. Even though there were times a year later when it felt like Mia and I were getting someplace, we never went over that boundary. We still collaborate well as good colleagues at the clinic. Even though things didn't work out romantically, I suppose that's just me. Conversely, my grandfather couldn't contain his disappointment and remarked, "Well, that's a shame. I used to believe that my work was over, but having obligations and receiving gratitude every day gives life a true meaning. I now understand why some elderly people want to work for the rest of their lives, even if they work in chain stores or healthcare facilities. Saying thank you to others and trying to bring smiles to their faces are significantly more satisfying than pursuing my own interests on my own. I think I figured out what matters most in life, thanks to my grandfather and Mia. I go back to the small country clinic today, bearing that in mind."